Today I'm going to tell you my retro computer story, how I got into computers in the first place. Warm up the CRT, it's time for another episode. I was born in 1980 in Ohio, and for my first 8 years I basically lived on an inactive farm. No neighbors, no friends, and little access to the outside world. My entire worldview was formed at that time by what was on television, and the biggest influencer of them all was Star Trek. Every weeknight at 7:30 p.m. on the local independent station, they played reruns of the original Star Trek. For some reason, that show spoke to me, and I started to find technology fascinating.
Fascinating.
So much so that I stopped getting electronic gadgets for Christmas because they would end up in pieces by New Year's Day. Then I discovered computers. We had Apple IIs in elementary school, and I fell in love. But we didn't have a computer at home, so I wasn't able to pursue my prime interest. I lacked access to the resources to do anything with that, but in the spring of 1986, that started to change. I don't remember the details, so I reached out to my dad to tell the story of how we got our first computer, the TRS-80 Model 1. So today, on my channel, we have Gary Stroh-Snyder, my dad, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the first computer we ever had when I was a kid, the TRS-80. So, from what I understand, Dad, we got that computer somewhere in, like, spring of 1986. What was the detail on that?
Yeah, as best I can remember, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
There was a kid that worked for me that had bought this thing off somebody else because he heard he could play games on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do with a computer, right?
Right, and also at the time where I worked, we were just getting into computers at work, so he thought it'd be a good tool so he could learn how to use a keyboard and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay.
Well, then he gets this bad boy home, fires it up, and realizes he doesn't know how to use it. So he did have the manuals with it at the time, and he played with it, and I'm not really sure what happened, but he had problems with it, and decided it was easier just to go buy a new unit instead of trying to mess with this one to figure out what the heck was wrong with it.
Okay. That's cool. So then he's like, here, Gary, you can have it, or how did that happen?
Well, yeah, basically he was complaining about it at the store, and of course at the time, my youngest son, Mr. Joe here, had always talked about having interest in computers and stuff, and so I was kind of shooting a breeze with this dude, and he said, well, heck, if you want it, you can have it. I'm done with it. So I said, well, I'll take it. So he brought it into work, and that's basically how the story started.
I gotcha. I remember when you brought that home, too. It was kind of like a cloudy day. That's why I'm thinking it was like in spring. It's kind of cool out. And we had it set up on the dining room table for the first time. It was there at the old farmhouse. And we plugged it in and turned it on. I don't think we were able to get it to work then, too. Do you think that might have been part of the reason why he wanted to get rid of it? Because there were some functional problems with it?
I believe so. Yeah, it was one of those things that was, he was either going to kill it or make it work.
Okay. And then,
so that's how we ended up with it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, and what I remember most about it back in that time period is that Joe, even though Dad got it for the family, Joe wasn't allowed to play with it. I do remember that. But I think that was actually mostly because there were problems with it and we could never really get it to work. I believe it ended up in storage and we rediscovered it when we moved houses.
Yeah, it could be. I can't right offhand. I don't remember.
Because I remember when we moved, that's when we rediscovered it again, and then it became the older brother's computer for a while, and he got to play with it. And of course, me being the younger brother, I'm not allowed to touch it. But he couldn't figure out how to make it work either. And then what I remember after that, it was somewhere in, when was it? It was like the summer of '93. He was like, I'm done with this thing. I can't make it work. Here, you can have it. And then I took it apart and fixed it. That's what I remember about it. Yeah. It ended up being my first computer. It was pretty cool. And then, to kind of sidetrack a little bit later, it was like the next spring, I think, was when I got my Apple IIs. I brought home that Trader. There was a Trader Times or something from the local gas station. I'm like, Mom and Dad, you need to get me this now. Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you for sharing that little bit of family history with me. I do appreciate it.
Oh, that's not a problem. It was kind of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. See you later.
See ya.
In the summer of 1993, I finally got my hands on the TRS-80, and it didn't work. The first thing that was messed up was the keyboard. It just didn't work right. So I borrowed my brother's soldering iron and just gave it a go. I opened it up and soldered some bodge wires across from the main board to the keyboard. This was the first time I had seen, touched, or even used a soldering iron, but I somehow managed to get that keyboard working. After that, I found out that I couldn't save or load anything. The cassette function caused the machine to go blank and unresponsive. I found that when this happened, the computer seemed to run a lot hotter. So my solution, in my 14-year-old logic, was to put a huge window box fan next to the computer to get it as cool as possible, then try again. For reasons that make no actual logical sense, it worked. In retrospect, I think a capacitor had shorted internally and caused the machine to go haywire during cassette operations. By complete coincidence, it blew itself clear just at the right time, because it worked every time after that without the fan. That summer was one of the best that I ever had. I had my first real taste of computer tech, and it was delicious. The TRS-80 eventually failed permanently and was replaced with 2 Apple IIe computers that I've talked about in another video. Well, that's my retro computer story. What's yours? Tell us in the comments. I'd like to thank Chris Torrance of the Assembly Lines podcast for inspiring this video, and my dad for agreeing to be interviewed. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on my latest adventures. You can also support me through Patreon or by snagging some merch. Links in the description. Well, that's all for today's episode. While you're here, check out some of my other videos, and remember, 8 bits are all you need.